Have you ever paused, really paused, and asked yourself, who am I? Not your name, not your job, not your story, but that quiet, unshakable I behind everything. The one that says, I think, I feel, I want. That sense of me, that seems to be there, watching your life unfold like a movie. Now, what if I told you that this I, this self, is not what you think it is? What if the one thing you've spent your entire life trying to protect, define, improve, impress, validate, never actually existed? This isn't a trick. It's not a riddle. It's one of the oldest, deepest questions humanity has ever faced. And it's one the Buddha answered, not with abstract theories, but with a profound clarity that changed the course of human understanding forever. You see, the idea of a self feels so real. It feels like something solid. It feels like the driver behind the wheel. We say, I was born. I am angry. I will die someday. We build entire lives around this one fragile concept. But here's the problem. What if it's just that, a concept? What if the I is not the driver, but the illusion on the windshield? Now I know this can feel unsettling, like someone just pulled the floor out from beneath you. But stay with me, because what lies beyond that illusion isn't despair, it's freedom. The kind of freedom the Buddha taught more than 2,500 years ago. A freedom not found in answers, but in seeing clearly. Seeing what? Seeing that there is no permanent self behind the experience. That doesn't mean nothing exists. It doesn't mean life is meaningless. And it certainly doesn't mean you don't matter. It means that what we call me, the thinker of thoughts, the feeler of feelings, is not some eternal, unchanging being trapped inside this skin. It's a process, a happening, a river flowing without a fixed shore. Think about this. When you were 5, were you the same person you are today? Not just your height or your hair, but your thoughts, your desires, your fears, your dreams. How many versions of you have already died? So another you could take their place. And yet we keep saying, I'm the same person. We cling to this sense of continuity, like a child clutching a fading photograph. But the Buddha looked deeper. He saw that what we call self is nothing more than a bundle of experiences, sights, sounds, sensations, thoughts, all arising and falling away again and again. He pointed to this illusion gently, with compassion, because he knew how painful it is to think you have something solid inside you, only to lose it again and again. We lose youth, we lose health, we lose people we love. And each time we say, why is this happening to me? But what if there was no fixed me for these things to happen to? What if everything you've ever called mine was just borrowed by a moment? You don't own your thoughts. You don't even choose most of them. They appear, they vanish, like waves on an ocean you didn't create. And that ocean, that's what the Buddha was pointing toward, not the waves, not the forms, but the nature of experience itself. This is not about rejecting who you are. It's about questioning the one who says, I am. Because here's the paradox. Only when we stop clinging to a false self can we finally meet life honestly, gently, awake. Let me tell you something that changed everything for me. Years ago, during a meditation retreat deep in the forest, I was sitting with my eyes closed. The wind brushed through the trees. Birds chirped in the distance. A memory rose, painful, vivid, sharp. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and instantly the mind cried out, this is me. This happened to me, I still carry this. But as I sat and just watched, something softened. The thought passed. The pain eased, and the me who was clinging to that old story, gone. There was no one left holding the memory, only presence. And in that moment I understood, not intellectually, but viscerally, that the self is not something I needed to hold. It was something I could let go of. And the moment I did, I was free, not in some grand, eternal sense, but just free for that breath. And that was enough. You see, the teaching of no self isn't meant to scare you. It's not meant to strip you of meaning. It's meant to liberate you, to free you from the exhausting weight of having to constantly prove who you are, to defend, achieve, grasp, protect. It's an invitation to step off the stage, to walk away from the mask, to come home to a life that's not about becoming someone, but about being no one, and realizing that no one was never missing anything at all. So if there is no self, if everything we've ever clung to is just a dance of sensations and thoughts, then who is born, who dies, and what does it even mean to be alive? Let's go deeper. We live as though there's a solid core behind our eyes, a real me sitting inside the cockpit, making decisions, having thoughts, feeling emotions, driving the whole machine of life. We talk about my body, my thoughts, my feelings, as if we're something separate from all of them, like a landlord of a house we happen to live in. But what if this landlord has never truly existed? Let's pause right here. Imagine waking up one day and realizing the house you've lived in your whole life was never really yours, that you were just passing through, a guest in a space held together by temporary causes. It's disorienting, isn't it? That's exactly what the Buddha asked us to investigate. He never said nothing exists. He never said you're an illusion. But he did say that what we think of as me is not a fixed thing, not an eternal being, not an object we can point to and say, "There, that's me." Instead, he offered something radically different, a framework, a mirror, 5 ever-changing elements that make up what we call the self, known as the 5 aggregates: form, the body, the material; feeling, pleasure, pain, neutrality; perception, the labeling, the recognition; mental formations, thoughts, habits, reactions, intentions; consciousness, the awareness that flickers from moment to moment. Together, they create the illusion of a person. But look closely, and you'll see none of them stay. The body, always changing. Skin ages, bones weaken, cells die and regenerate every second. Even the you that's listening right now, gone. In the blink of a breath, feelings, rising and falling like ocean waves. What hurt you yesterday might make you laugh tomorrow. Or maybe you can't even remember what it was. Perceptions, shifting like clouds. The face you once adored might now stir indifference. The taste you hated as a child might now bring comfort. And thoughts, they come and go like strangers passing through a train station. Some loud, some subtle, but none staying for long. Even consciousness, the observer itself, isn't stable. It's not some eternal flashlight shining from within. It's more like a flickering candle, responding to what it meets, moment by moment. So if all of these elements are changing, which one of them is you? And more importantly, why do we cling to this idea that something within them is unchanging? The answer is simple, because it feels safe. The illusion of a permanent self gives us control. It makes life feel predictable, structured. It helps us say, "I know who I am." But that comfort comes at a price, because once you believe there's a real you, you start protecting it, fighting for it, proving it. You start comparing, "I'm better than him." You start defending, "She disrespected me." You start fearing, "What if I lose myself?" And suddenly, life becomes a battleground, all because we mistook a process for a person. But here's what's astonishing. The Buddha wasn't trying to take something away from us. He was offering us release, a way out of the prison of self. Because if you're not a fixed thing, you don't have to carry everything. You're not your past. You're not your pain. You're not your story. You're the awareness through which stories arise and fall. And that's liberating. Let me give you an image. Imagine a cart pulled by 5 wild horses, each one representing the 5 aggregates. Some days they run in harmony. Other days they pull in opposite directions. But here's the twist. There is no driver on the cart. The horses move because of conditions, training, weather, noise, terrain. Not because some master sits behind them with a whip. And yet, we watch this cart from the outside and say, "That's John, that's Maria, that's me." But the Buddha invites us to step closer, to look inside the cart, and realize no one's driving, just movement, just process, just interdependent causes flowing together. This isn't something to believe, it's something to see. You don't need to abandon your name or erase your memories. You simply need to watch. Watch how anger arises when someone cuts in line. Watch how sadness blooms when someone walks away. Watch how pride grows when someone praises you. And then ask, who is watching this? Where is the one who claims all this is mine? You won't find anyone, because there's no fixed watcher behind the screen, just awareness, reflecting whatever appears. And when we start to see through this myth of a permanent self, a strange and beautiful thing happens. We stop taking life so personally. We stop clinging so tightly to every win and every loss. We stop building fortresses to protect something that was never really threatened. We start living like a river, not trying to hold its shape, not trying to become something, just flowing moment by moment through joy, sorrow, stillness, and storm. And in that flow, we find peace, not because life got easier, but because we no longer believe there's a me who must conquer it all. And so, the question begins to take a new form. If the self is not permanent, if the I is just a bundle of moving pieces, then what exactly is born when a baby takes its first breath? What is this thing we call rebirth? And more importantly, if no one is born, can anyone truly die? Let's keep going. When we look in the mirror, we see a face, a familiar one, aging perhaps, marked by laughter, by loss, by time, and we whisper to ourselves, "This is me." But is it? Because here's the honest truth. What you see in the mirror is not who you are. It's just the temporary surface of something much more elusive. The Buddha didn't just teach that the self is impermanent. He went deeper. He showed us that you, the thing you call you, isn't a person at all. You're a process, a flow, a dance of conditions. And once you start seeing this, everything changes. Because when we believe we're a person, we cling to identity like a shield. We defend opinions as if they are limbs. We hold grudges as if they define our soul. But when you realize you're a process, you stop fighting the river. Let's get closer. Right now, in this very moment, pause, listen to your breath, feel your heartbeat. Notice the thoughts rising and falling. None of this is still. None of this is solid. And yet, it's all happening. That is the miracle. There's no one controlling it, no fixed eye pulling the levers. There's just this unfolding. The Buddha called it conditioned arising. Everything you think you are, your fears, desires, habits, even your name, all arose because of causes, because of your parents, your culture, your past choices, your traumas, your joys, all weaving together like wind sculpting waves. And like waves, you rise, you break, you return, over and over again. You're not the wave, you're the ocean moving through form. Let me tell you a story. There was once a young monk who came to a Zen master trembling. He said, "Master, I feel like I'm losing myself in meditation. I can't tell who I am anymore. It's terrifying." The master looked at him and smiled. "Good. Now you're finally seeing." The monk was confused. "But master, if I am no longer myself, then who is breathing? Who is feeling all this?" The master leaned in and whispered, "The breath is breathing itself. The feeling is feeling itself. You are simply witnessing what never belonged to you." That was the moment the monk understood. He wasn't his body. He wasn't even his mind. He was just witnessing. And the more he let go, the more alive he became. We are like whirlpools in a vast river. From a distance, it looks like a thing. It spins, it moves, it has a shape. But look closer, and you'll see there's no entity there. Just water moving in a pattern. That's you, that's me, that's all of us. And when we try to freeze the whirlpool and say, "This is me," we suffer, because life wasn't meant to be frozen. It was meant to move. Your thoughts, not you. Your feelings, not you. Your memories, your preferences, your regrets, your roles, not you. They're visitors, passing shadows across the stillness of awareness. But here's what's astonishing. You don't need to get rid of any of them. You don't need to kill the ego, or escape the world, or abandon your humanity. You just need to see it. With quiet eyes, with a heart that doesn't cling. And when you do, everything softens. The need to prove yourself fades. The fear of being misunderstood fades. Even the craving to be someone special gently slips away, because you realize you were never the story. You were the space the story passed through. Let me put it another way. You are not the dancer. You are the dance, not the flame, but the flicker, not the voice, but the echo, not the being, but the becoming. So the next time pain arises, ask, who is hurting? Stay there, don't rush. The next time pride swells, ask, who is proud? Feel it without grabbing. And when love floods in, ask, who is loving? Because behind every wave, there is silence. Not empty, but infinite. And maybe that's what we really are, not the temporary storm, but the sky that holds it. So now, the illusion of a permanent me begins to loosen. Not because we've destroyed it, but because we've stopped clinging. And what's left? Just this. Breath rising, body sitting, mind flowing, nobody there, and yet life fully alive. But if there's no solid self here, what happens when this body dies? If we're just a process, what does it mean to be born again? And what exactly is being reborn? Let's look deeper. So if you're not a permanent self, if there's no fixed I sitting inside your chest, then what is it that's born? What is it that returns again and again, lifetime after lifetime? This question is one of the deepest puzzles in the human heart. And if we rush to answer it, we miss the miracle entirely. Let's slow down. Let's feel our way into this. Because birth, in the Buddhist view, is not the arrival of a soul. It's not a permanent being jumping from one body to another like a traveler boarding a train. No, the Buddha never taught that there was a spirit passing from life to life like a suitcase of memories. Instead, he showed us something more subtle, more profound. Something that modern science is just beginning to glimpse. There is no thing that is reborn, only conditions continuing. Let's explore. Imagine a flame lighting another candle. One touches the wick, the next comes alive. Is it the same flame? Not quite. But is it entirely different? Also no. What passed wasn't a thing, it was energy, momentum, a continuation. That's rebirth. Not the reincarnation of a self, but the reappearance of conditions, a karmic echo, not of who you were, but how you lived. You see, everything you do, every action, every thought, every intention leaves a trace. Not in the sense of a cosmic scoreboard, but like a stone thrown into a lake. The ripples move outward. Long after the hand is still, that ripple is what continues. That ripple is rebirth. So what is reborn? Not a me, but a momentum, a pattern of causes, a stream of karma seeking new ground to flow. It's not personal, it's process. Let me tell you a story. A young boy born in a remote village in Tibet could speak fluent Sanskrit before he ever learned to write. He described temples he had never seen. He named people long dead. Monks from another monastery recognized his words, not as imagination, but as memories of a lama who had died years before. Was he the same person? No. But something had flowed forward, a ripple from one life touching the surface of another. This story plays out across cultures, in children, in dreams, in sudden bursts of wisdom we cannot explain. But the Buddha never said to believe blindly. He said, look, observe, not just the mystery of what might come after death, but the mini rebirths that happen every moment. Because rebirth isn't just a cosmic event, it happens right here, right now. Anger arises, and if you feed it, it becomes a new moment of suffering. Compassion arises, and if you nurture it, it becomes peace in someone else's day. Each moment is birth. Each choice is karma. Each intention is a seed. So instead of asking, what happens when I die? Perhaps the better question is, what am I giving birth to right now? Are you birthing peace, or conflict, kindness, or fear? The Buddha pointed out that birth doesn't begin in the womb. It begins in the mind. In our grasping, our clinging, our craving to become something. The moment we say, this must be mine, birth begins. The moment we say, I cannot lose this, we've stepped into the cycle again. But the moment we soften, the moment we let go, something breaks open, and in that space, the cycle pauses, the craving fades, and a new kind of birth becomes possible, not one of flesh and blood, but of wisdom, of presence, of stillness that doesn't seek a next chapter. So when people ask, if no one is born, how can someone be reborn? The answer is like this: a forest burns, the fire spreads, another patch of land catches. The flame continues, but not the tree, not the roots, not the smoke, just the burning. That's karma, that's rebirth, not personal, not eternal, but real. So if you want to understand your future, look at the way you live today. And if you want to change your future, begin here, begin now. Live like everything you touch echoes beyond your lifetime, because it does. But wait, if that's what birth is, a ripple of causes finding new ground, then what about death? If no one is truly born, can anyone truly die? Let's walk into that quiet next. So if no one is truly born, and no fixed self walks from one life to another, what then is it that survives? What continues after the body fades? After the story ends? After the name is no longer spoken? The Buddha answered with one word: karma. But this karma is not what many people think. It's not a cosmic punishment. It's not divine justice. It's not some moral scoreboard in the sky. It is far more subtle, far more immediate, and far more powerful. Karma means intention. It means volitional action. It is the energy of choice. Every thought you feed, every word you speak, every action you carry out, leaves an imprint, not on a soul, not on some celestial record book, but in the very fabric of experience, in the web of causes that form your next moment, your next breath, your next life. But here's the paradox: this karma has no owner. Let that settle for a moment. Karma continues, but there's no one it belongs to. That's the radical teaching. That's the beauty and the terror of it. You see, we assume that if there is action, there must be an actor. If there are consequences, there must be someone to receive them. But the Buddha shattered that idea. He showed us that process doesn't require a person. Just like fire doesn't need a fireplace to burn. Just like a melody doesn't need a singer to be heard. Karma doesn't need a self to move forward. It's like lighting a match and tossing it into dry grass. The fire spreads, but whose fire is it? No one's, and yet, it's real. Let me tell you a story. There once was a farmer who spent his entire life growing rice. He worked from dawn till dusk, never hurting a soul, never seeking fame. One day, he died quietly under the shade of a mango tree. Years later, a child was born in a village far away. Gentle by nature, generous, content with little. No one connected them. No lineage, no blood, no name, but the warmth of the farmer's kindness had rippled out, unseen, unclaimed, like the scent of flowers carried on the wind. That is karma. It doesn't need identity. It doesn't need continuity of me. It just flows naturally, silently, inevitably. And so the question is, who continues? What kind of energy have I put into motion? Because once karma is set in motion, It moves. It finds new ground, new form, new mind, not because someone travels there, but because conditions allow it, just as clouds form when moisture, temperature, and pressure align. A new life begins when karmic energy meets fertile ground. But that energy carries a flavor, a moral weight, not imposed from above, but embedded in the action itself. Kindness softens the world around it. Hatred poisons even the vessel that holds it. Greed tightens the heart of anyone who touches it. Compassion leaves a fragrance even when it's unseen. And the beauty of it is this: since karma has no owner, we're not trapped by who we were. You don't have to be your past. You can plant new seeds right now. You can drop the heavy narrative of guilt, shame, regret, because the process doesn't care about your story. It responds only to action. That's freedom. No permanent self means no permanent prison. You can begin again in this very breath, this very thought, this very gesture. There is no judge watching, only cause and effect, moving like wind through the trees, gentle or fierce, depending on what we stir. So the next time you wonder if your life matters, remember this: your smile, your patience, your forgiveness, your silence in a moment of anger. These things ripple. They move beyond you. They live long after you are gone, not because you endure, but because life echoes. And what echoes is not your name, not your face, but your impact. That is karma. So now we return to the ancient question, not with fear, but with clarity. When I die, what continues? Not a self, not a soul, but a signature, not something you can see, but something the world still feels. Not you, but what you left in motion. And when we understand this, we stop needing to be eternal, because our actions already are. But this truth leads to another mystery. If karma is real, if causes give rise to conditions, if energy moves forward, then can we ever be free from it? Can we escape the endless spinning? Can the wheel of birth and death finally stop? Let's go deeper. We've followed the ripple of karma across lifetimes. We've seen how it moves, not as someone, but as momentum, not owned, but carried by the wind of causes and conditions. But now, a harder question lingers. If there's no permanent me, no soul traveling from one life to the next, then what really dies? What is it that ends? When the body grows still, when the final breath leaves the lips, when the heart, so full of memory, beats no more. This question isn't philosophical, it's intimate. It touches something tender and raw inside us, because beneath the curiosity about death, there is fear, not always fear of pain, not even fear of the unknown, but fear of disappearance, of being forgotten, of not mattering. We whisper quietly to ourselves, if I end completely, was I ever real at all? The Buddha didn't answer with false comfort. He didn't promise an eternal heaven. He didn't describe death as a doorway to a golden afterlife, where your self is preserved like an artifact. He gave us something deeper, truth, not the kind written in scriptures, but the kind you can see with your own eyes. If you dare to look, here it is. Death is not the end of you, because there was never a solid you to begin with. And in that lies both the sorrow and the freedom. Let's take a closer look. The Buddha taught that what we call a person is simply a temporary arrangement, like a sand mandala. Beautiful, intricate, carefully formed over time, but one gust of wind, and it's gone. What ends at death is not a being. What ends is the pattern, the 5 aggregates: the body, the sensations, the perceptions, the mental formations, and the consciousness. They come undone, not because something has been taken, but because the conditions holding them together dissolve. It's like a candle flickering out. The flame didn't go anywhere. It just no longer has the wax to feed it. There's no longer a someone holding the experience together, But does that mean life disappears? No, life doesn't vanish. It changes shape. Let me tell you something beautiful. When a person dies, their voice goes silent, but their words can still echo in your heart for decades. Their body returns to earth, but the trees they planted still give shade. Their hands turn cold, but the warmth they gave to another still moves. Nothing is ever truly lost. It just returns to the stream. This is not poetic idealism. It's physics, it's biology, it's karma. The self doesn't endure, but the impact does. And once you really see this, death begins to lose its sting, because what we grieve is not the ending of a person. It's the dissolving of a form we loved. But when we see clearly, we realize the form was never the thing we loved. We loved the kindness, the laughter, the presence, and those things don't die, they ripple. So perhaps we've been asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not what ends, but rather what remains. The Buddha showed us that death is not an enemy. It's a natural part of a natural flow. We fear death because we've been taught to fear non-being. But what if we've misunderstood what it means to be? What if being is not a possession, but a process? Then death isn't the loss of a self, it's the releasing of a shape, like a wave returning to the sea. Is the wave lost, or has it simply become what it always was? Let me leave you with this image. A bell rings in a temple. You hear its sound, clear and resonant, but then the sound fades into silence. Where did it go? Nowhere. It was never separate to begin with. It was always part of the stillness. That is death, not a vanishing. Not an exile, but a return to stillness, to suchness, to the groundless ground of being. So then we ask, if death is not the enemy, if what ends was never fixed, if what remains is not personal, then how should we live? How does one walk through a life, knowing we do not own it, knowing we cannot keep it? Let's open that door together. So you've seen through the illusion of the self. You've tasted the stillness behind the noise. You've begun to live lightly, knowing that nothing can be truly held. And then, just when you think you're free, the ego sneaks in through the back door. Not loud this time, not wearing the face of pride or greed. No, this time it wears robes. It speaks softly. It calls itself awakened. This is the spiritual ego, and it may be the most dangerous illusion of all. Because the ordinary ego wants to be rich, admired, protected. But the spiritual ego, it wants to be enlightened. It wants to be seen as wise. It wants to appear free of self, while secretly building a new, more subtle one. Let's say it clearly, saying there is no self. Can itself become a self? Let me explain. You've probably heard someone say it before. If there is no I, then who is suffering? Who is meditating? Who is seeking? And the clever reply often comes, there is no one. But sometimes this isn't true wisdom, it's performance. It's a new identity. I am the one who knows there is no one. It sounds profound, but underneath, it's the same old game. The same craving for specialness, but now wrapped in spiritual language. The Buddha warned of this, not in grand pronouncements, but in gentle precision. He knew the ego doesn't die easily. It just shape-shifts. One day it's I am a failure. The next it's I am awakened. Same attachment, different costume. You can drop the story of being unworthy and immediately pick up the story of being superior. You can release the suffering of identity, only to cling to the identity of someone who has transcended identity. This is the trap. This is the shadow side of progress. But here's the good news. If you can see it, you can soften it. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to judge yourself for it. You just need to notice. Because real awakening isn't loud. It doesn't need to declare itself. It's not found in the number of books you've read, or how many hours you meditate, or how many teachings you can quote. It's found in how lightly you hold yourself, how gently you treat others, how little you need to be right. Let me tell you a story. A young monk once approached his master and said, "Master, I have realized there is no self. I see it clearly." The master smiled and asked, "Do you still get upset when someone disagrees with you?" The monk paused. "Sometimes." "Do you still feel proud when others call you wise?" "A little, yes." Then the master said, "Perhaps you've only traded one illusion for another." Real freedom isn't about defeating the ego like an enemy. It's about seeing its tricks with compassion, watching how it rebuilds, how it sneaks in through thoughts like, "I'm more awake than others. I see what others are too blind to see. I no longer care about approval, but I hope people notice that." See the humor, see the subtle grasping. That's the work, because the ego doesn't care if you're spiritual or secular, a yogi or a banker, a monk or a musician. It only cares that it exists. It wants survival, and it will even pretend to be enlightened to stay alive. So how do we move beyond this? Not by striving harder, not by collecting more teachings, but by softening, by noticing, by letting go of even the idea that we are beyond letting go. True humility isn't self-hatred, it's self-transparency. It's being nobody special, and not needing to be. It's no longer performing emptiness, it's just resting in it. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, "They just don't get it like I do," pause, breathe, smile a little, and know that's the next doorway, because awakening isn't a state to be achieved. It's a letting go of everything that obscures what's already here. And perhaps the final letting go is letting go of the one who wants to be awake. So now, with that veil lifted, what does life actually look like? When there's nothing left to defend, what does it feel like to live without a center? Not lost, not scattered, but vast, present, open. Let's step into that. So what happens when the story of me finally loosens? When the weight you've carried for years, the identity you protected, projected, perfected, slips gently from your shoulders? What does life look like? When you are no longer the center of it, what does freedom feel like? Not as an idea, but as a living truth. Let me tell you, it's not what most people think. Freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's not about chasing pleasure or avoiding pain. It's not about manifesting your dream life or rising above it all like some untouchable sage. No, real freedom, the kind the Buddha pointed to, is far more quiet, far more intimate. It's the freedom of not needing to be someone. It's the spaciousness that arises when no experience needs to be claimed, when no emotion needs to be suppressed or performed, when life can come and go without crashing into a self who clings to it. Let me give you an example. Imagine walking through a forest. You hear the bird song, you feel the breeze, you see the light play on the leaves. There is awareness, there is beauty, there is sensation, but there's no need for narration. No inner voice saying, "I am walking in the forest. I am having a peaceful moment. I hope I remember this for later." There's just walking, just hearing, just life living itself. This is living without a self. And it's not distant or abstract. It's available right now. Not through force, but through letting go. Letting go of the need to interpret. Letting go of the need to prove. Letting go of the constant internal commentary that tries to make every moment about me. And here's the paradox. When you stop being the center of your world, you start experiencing the world fully. You begin to notice the small things, the way sunlight falls across the floor, the way a stranger smiles and forgets you a second later, the way tears rise and fall without explanation. Everything becomes vivid, not because you are witnessing it, but because there's no one in the way. The mind becomes a mirror, not holding on, not pushing away, just reflecting. Even emotions change, pain still comes, fear still arises, anger still visits. But now they are guests, not invaders, not identities. You no longer say, "I am angry." You simply notice, anger is passing through. It moves like weather. You don't need to hold it. You don't need to fight it. You don't need to become it. This is the deepest kind of freedom, not freedom from life, but freedom in life. You can still love deeply. But now love is not possessive. You can still act with purpose, but without needing validation. You can still feel sadness, but without drowning in a story about what it says about you. There is room, there is stillness, there is breath, and slowly you realize something profound. You don't need to be someone to be here. In fact, the more you disappear, the more life becomes whole. Let me share a Zen saying. Spring does not become spring by declaring it is spring. The plum blossom blooms, and the season is revealed. So too, your presence doesn't need announcement. When you stop trying to be present, you are, and in this freedom, compassion blooms naturally, because when there's no self to protect, there's nothing blocking your heart. You feel others more clearly, not as separate beings, but as waves in the same sea. You respond with gentleness, not because it's the right thing, but because it's the true thing, without a self. There's no one to prove, no one to impress. Just presence, just connection, just this. So what does freedom really mean? It means you are no longer the narrator of the moment. You are the silence beneath the story. You are the openness that allows it all to unfold. And from that space, a new kind of life begins. Not a grand transformation, not fireworks, but a quiet returning to simplicity, to clarity, to now. That is the freedom the Buddha pointed to, not an escape, not an achievement, but a homecoming. And when you live from that space, life no longer needs to be extraordinary to feel sacred. A bowl of rice, a cup of tea, a breath, each one becomes enough. Each one becomes infinite. So then comes the final question. If nothing belongs to you, if life flows freely without a self, what remains after all is let go? What do you leave behind when you no longer need to be remembered? Let's follow that ripple. One last time. Sometimes truth doesn't arrive as a teaching. It doesn't come wrapped in ancient words or spoken by a master. Sometimes it slips in quietly, through a story, a question, a moment of stillness you didn't plan for. And these moments, these glimpses of the path, are often more powerful than any philosophy. Let me share a few with you. There was once a woman in her 70s, a longtime meditator in a small rural sangha, quiet, unassuming, never speaking much. One day during a Dharma circle, someone asked her, "What brought you to Buddhism?" She smiled gently and said, "My husband died, and for 3 months I kept setting a plate for him at dinner. Not because I forgot, but because I didn't know how to stop being someone's wife." The room fell silent. Then she added, "One day I didn't set the plate, and nothing felt missing, not because I stopped loving him, but because I realized love was never something I had to own." That is what letting go looks like. It's not always sudden. It's not always a lightning strike. Sometimes it's a dinner table. Sometimes it's an empty chair. And in that emptiness, freedom. Another story comes from a monk in Thailand. He spent 20 years in a remote forest monastery. Each day, he swept leaves along a path that led to nowhere in particular. One day, a young student asked him, "Why do you sweep so carefully every day? The wind always brings more leaves." The monk smiled. "That's why I sweep, not to clean the path, but to practice walking it with care." The lesson: liberation isn't in achieving, it's in how you show up, even in the smallest things, especially in the smallest things. And then there's a story from a hospice nurse. She once sat with a man in his final hours, a man who had lived chasing wealth, success, reputation. He turned to her and asked, "Will anyone remember me?" She held his hand and whispered, "I will, not because of what you did, but because of how you smiled at me yesterday, when you had nothing left to give." In the final moments of life, he didn't cling to his name, he let it drop, and his last breath came with a strange peace, like a tide going out. Not in panic, but in surrender. We fear death so deeply. But the truth is, many people don't fear the end. They fear not having mattered. And yet, as these stories show us, you don't need to be extraordinary to leave a mark. You just need to be present, to show up, to care. That's what echoes. Not the title, not the teachings, not the robes, but the way you held a child's hand, the way you forgave someone who didn't deserve it, the way you made tea for someone in silence. These are the footprints that remain, not in marble, but in memory, in heart, and maybe in you listening right now. You've probably had your own moments too, moments you can't explain, but that rearranged something inside you. Maybe it was a sunset, maybe it was a heartbreak, maybe it was a few quiet seconds after a long cry, when everything felt okay again. You can't always describe it, but somehow something fell away. In those moments, you weren't trying to be anyone. You weren't chasing anything. You weren't defending a story. You were just here, simple, open, real. That is the Dharma waking up in you. One last story. A Zen teacher was once asked, "How do you know if a student is close to awakening?" He paused, then said, "They stop asking how close they are. Because in the end, freedom isn't a destination. It's the falling away of the one who's trying to arrive." And so we reflect, not just with words, but with our life. Who are we when we don't need to be anyone? How do we love when there's no I to claim it? What kind of trace do we leave when we no longer need to be remembered? These are not questions to answer. These are questions to live. And perhaps in living them, you'll find the final truth that no teaching can give you. Only silence can. So now, one last breath together before we close. And now here we are, not at the end of a teaching, but at the quiet curve of a river returning to itself. You've heard the questions. Who are you if not a self? What is born if there's no soul? What dies if no one was ever truly here? And through every chapter, you've been invited not to believe, but to look, to see directly, to sit with the silence between thoughts, to notice the ever-changing swirl of sensations, memories, reactions, and realize none of them can be you. You are not the contents of the stream. You are the clarity of the stream itself. And perhaps you've begun to sense it, that there is something more peaceful than control, more real than identity, more alive than any story the ego could write. A life not owned but lived, a love not grasped but shared, a freedom not performed but felt deeply, simply here. When the illusion of I fades, what remains isn't emptiness, it's intimacy, intimacy with the moment, with others. With this mystery we call life, it's like returning to the river, not to conquer it, not to label it, but to float in its current, fully awake. So now the path continues, not because there's more to understand, but because understanding is no longer the goal. Instead of asking, "Who am I?" you might now ask, "How gently can I live?" Instead of clinging to answers, you might listen for the question behind the question. And in doing so, you're not escaping the world. You're finally meeting it. Without armor, let me leave you with one final whisper from the Buddha. Just as a candle does not make noise when it burns, truth does not need to announce itself. It simply shines. So go quietly, go kindly, go lightly, not because you've become someone, but because you no longer need to be. If something in these words touched something in you, not in your mind but in that still, quiet place behind the thoughts, then let the journey continue with us. Subscribe to Zen Buddhism Wisdom, where we share teachings, stories, and moments to help you live more mindfully, more freely, and more in tune with the life that's already unfolding in you. And if this message felt like a breath of peace, share it with someone who might need that breath too. Until next time, be well, be present, and walk gently.